There's a moment that happens in living rooms, in bars, at stadiums, a moment where everyone around you stands up. The noise peaks. Someone scored, someone won, someone did something that apparently matters enormously. And you sit there, perfectly still, watching other people feel something you can't quite locate in yourself. You're not confused. You understand what happened. You just don't feel it. And the strange part isn't the absence of feeling. The strange part is watching people around you lose themselves completely, hands shaking, voices cracking over something that, to you, reads more like information than emotion. A number changed on a screen, a ball crossed a line, and yet the room is electric with something that bypasses you entirely. Most people, if they notice this about themselves, file it under "I'm just not a sports person." They say it casually, almost apologetically, like it's a minor personality quirk, like preferring tea over coffee. But that explanation doesn't quite reach the root of what's actually happening, because this isn't really about sports at all. Society has a soft way of making people like this feel like they're missing something. Like emotional detachment from collective rituals is a form of coldness, or a closed door, or worse, a kind of superiority dressed up as indifference. And that's not what this is. That framing is wrong, and it misses the entire psychology underneath. What we're actually talking about is a specific relationship between the self and collective emotion, and the wiring behind it is far more intricate than anyone usually explains. When a crowd of people watches a game together, what they're actually doing is participating in what psychologists call collective effervescence, a term coined by Emile Durkheim over a century ago to describe the experience of emotional synchrony between people sharing a physical moment. Your nervous system, if it's wired for it, does something remarkable. It mirrors the emotional states of people around you. The brain's mirror neuron systems don't just help you understand what someone else is feeling, they help you feel it alongside them. Their excitement becomes, quite literally, your excitement. Their despair lands in your chest. But here's what research in effective neuroscience has been quietly confirming: this process is not uniform. People differ significantly in what's called emotional contagion susceptibility. Some nervous systems are highly permeable. They absorb the emotional climate of a room almost automatically. Others are more bounded. The feeling doesn't transfer, not because something is blocked, but because the architecture is different. And that architecture didn't appear from nowhere. For many people who feel little watching sports, the pattern traces back to an early environment where emotional attunement had costs. When you grow up in a space where it wasn't always safe to be swept along by collective feeling, where reading the room carefully mattered more than joining it, the nervous system learns to observe rather than merge. It learns to stay slightly outside the wave rather than inside it. This is not a character flaw. It is an adaptive response. The body learned something useful and it held on to it. There's also something worth naming about the nature of symbolic attachment. Sports fandom, at its psychological core, is about extended identity. The team becomes an extension of the self, so its victories feel like personal victories. Researchers have found that fans experience genuine surges in testosterone after their team wins, and genuine drops after losses. Their bodies respond as if the outcome was personally meaningful. For this to work, though, you have to have made the attachment in the first place. You have to have handed a piece of your identity to something external. Some people are simply more reluctant to do that, and not without reason. People who have had to be self-contained, who learned early that external things are unpredictable, often protect their emotional investment more carefully. They don't hand pieces of themselves to outcomes they can't control. That caution doesn't vanish when a game starts. Now here's the part that complicates it in an interesting way. The same people who feel nothing watching a penalty shootout will often describe crying at a piece of music they weren't expecting, or feeling an almost unbearable tenderness, watching a stranger be kind to another stranger. The emotional range is there. The capacity for feeling is intact. What's different is the trigger, or more precisely, the type of connection that opens the door. For some people, feeling requires depth or surprise or intimacy. The collective ritual doesn't reach them, but something quiet and specific does. That's not a narrower emotional life. It may actually be a more selectively deep one. None of this makes one way of being better. The person who cries when their team scores isn't less evolved for having borrowed their identity from something communal. That borrowing is profoundly human. It's one of the oldest forms of belonging we have. And the person who sits still while everyone stands isn't colder, or more rational, or less capable of love. They are just operating from a different nervous system, one that found different ways to survive, and different doors through which feeling enters. The quiet cost, if there is one, is belonging. Collective rituals exist partly to create synchrony, and when you stand outside them, there can be a loneliness in that, a sense of watching something through glass that others live inside. That's worth acknowledging honestly, without fixing or pathologizing it. But there's also a quiet strength. The person who doesn't merge with the crowd retains something, a steadiness, a sense of self that doesn't rise and fall with external outcomes, an ability to remain present in the room without being dissolved by it. If you recognize yourself here, you're not broken, you're not cold, you're not missing some essential human function. You're someone whose nervous system learned to relate to the world in a particular way. And that way, like all ways, carries its own costs and its own gifts. And if you've always felt slightly outside the things that seem to move everyone else, sports, certain rituals, moments you're supposed to feel, there's a good chance that's part of a larger pattern about how you connect, how you protect yourself, and where your emotional life actually lives. That pattern in all its detail goes much deeper than a game.